Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here, ready to yet again bring to you all down a rather bizarre path that links to our fine beat 'em up history. There is no doubt that when it comes to this genre, one of the most memorable and impactful franchises of all time is of course Streets of Rage. The wonderful quadrilogy of titles featuring the great sounds of Yuzo Koshiro. The game certainly put the beats in beat 'em ups. Since though there was such an incredibly long wait between the third and fourth installment in the series, in the downtime between entries, this led to an incredible amount of highly creative fan projects springing up, which would often deliver their own unique Streets of Rage experiences. In today's video we are going to be looking at one of the many of these that exist, as we discuss the unlikely crossover that someone created that mixes the game with that of Konami's Silent Hill. Yes, my lovely audience, this game really exists, so let's discuss it further. This, ladies and gents, is the mysterious Streets of Rage Silent Hill. Yeah! Going back to the first half of the 90s, Sega Mega Drive owners would have the opportunity to play the legendary Streets of Rage series. Games that by the second installment didn't just match the arcade beat 'em up experience, but arguably topped it. But as time would progress, for a great while, the 2D side-scrolling brawler genre would fall into obscurity, with games featuring 3D polygonal models leading trends by the latter portion of the same decade. 1999 would result in a franchise being born that would feature such a graphical style, which would of course be Konami's Silent Hill. The game used a third-person view with real-time rendering of 3D environments, but ingeniously to mitigate the limitations of the PlayStation hardware of the time, developers would liberally use fog and darkness to muddle the graphics. These aesthetics would help define this survival horror series that would place a heavy focus on protagonists with combat training taking on hostile creatures and monsters. Following on from the success that the Resident Evil series had experienced, survival horror games would prove to be big business, becoming one of the defining genres of the era, much like beat 'em ups had become in the late 80s and early 90s. I think it would be safe to say that the Silent Hill and Streets of Rage franchises could not be further apart. They existed at different points in history, featured completely different graphical styles, and are not even remotely similar in gameplay, with the only factors on the surface that draw them together really being video game violence. But a cross between the Streets of Rage series and Silent Hill is not a completely alien concept, especially amongst the OpenBoR community, fan developers who have been placing their own spin on Streets of Rage for years. A game similar in style that we have looked at in the past on this channel was the fan project known as Streets of Rage Zombies, a video game that would lovingly craft elements into a Streets of Rage game from a number of different horror-based sources. This would include satirising the likes of Pennywise the Clown from It and the woman who comes out of the television in The Ring. It certainly is a unique take on Streets of Rage, or well, at least felt like it at the time I first found the game. While we already know that Streets of Rage Zombies was created by an OpenBoR community member known as Alexei Alexandro, like an internet creepypasta, the creator of Streets of Rage Silent Hill is unknown. And when I say that, I mean that in a quite literal sense, as if you take yourself over to Chrono Crash forums, a sort of hub for the OpenBoR community, the username attached to the creation of a game is a user by the name of Unknown. How spooktacular! Upon checking further sources though, and to instantly kill the magic and mystery surrounding the game, according to YouTube user BoggyTheWorm, Streets of Rage Silent Hill was created by a man with the internet alias of Anti-Guff. If that name sounds familiar to you, that would be because we have mentioned him before on here, as he was responsible for creating the disturbingly gritty in nature Streets of Rage Russia. Streets of Rage Silent Hill, which predates the Russia game, saw various versions of the title published. An early version with just 2 playable characters, a second version from 2013 adding more playable characters, enemies and other elements to the game, and finally a more refined yet tougher version of the game which didn't include infinite combos. Apart from predating Streets of Rage Russia, this game also predates zombies, which puts into perspective how innovative that this game actually was. Even if, according to BoggyTheWorm, Andy Guff himself is not too fond of this effort anymore, due to it being some of his earlier work. Those with a keen eye will note that with this game, the creator has modified some of the well-known Streets of Rage characters into those from the Streets of Rage franchise. This includes the likes of Axel, who has been changed into James Sunderland, the everyman protagonist from Silent Hill 2. Further to this, Blaze has been transformed into Angela Orozco, another character from Silent Hill 2. Or how about the fatty boom boom Streets of Rage sprite known as Bongo, being modified to be a playable version of Eddie Dombrowski, the insecure, mentally disturbed, bullied young man who is determined to kill the next person who laughs at him. We also have a modded playable version of Lisa, one of the boss characters from the nightclub stage of Streets of Rage 3. She has become Maria, who is arguably the primary antagonist of the second Silent Hill game. In fact, it has not just been Streets of Rage characters who have been modified and made playable characters for the game, as the creator also took Lucia from Final Fight 3 and turned her into Heather Mason, who, while featuring as a supporting character in Silent Hill 2, she would be used as the main protagonist in Silent Hill 3. As many of these playable fighters were not playable until later versions of the game, they also double up as boss fighters who must be defeated at the end of certain stages throughout this affair. To be fair though, this is perfectly in line with the Streets of Rage franchise, as enemies such as Shiva, Rue, and even Ash would be secret playable characters in specific versions of one of the games, Bare Knuckle 3. Mirroring that of the Silent Hill series, this entire side-scrolling brawler features unsettling aesthetics and hordes of disturbing creatures to contend with. The key difference though is, rather than spending the majority of time trying to run away from them like in Silent Hill games, on this occasion you're spending all of your time trying to punch them in the face or kick them in the head. Well, that is if your opponents even have a head. But if you fancy German suplexing a zombie-like opponent, this is certainly the game for you. Those who remember my coverage of Streets of Rage Russia in the past may be able to see many similarities in common with Silent Hill and its Russian successor. The same level of grittiness can be witnessed throughout, and many of the stages look and feel very similar. In fact, correct me if I am mistaken, but I believe many of them indeed are the same stages, albeit the fact the creator seems to have included a lot more litter and graffiti in the Russian retelling of the game. No wonder Streets of Rage Russia feels so unsettling if it was created from the assets of a title that was made to look like Silent Hill. The game has a lot of intimidating and often gory animations with the playthrough, offering up Silent Hill Easter eggs all over the place. Playable characters who I've not yet mentioned who also double up as bosses include the likes of the iconic Pyramid Head, the physical manifestation of James Sunderland's guilt and desire for punishment, who exists to keep him human and help him remember his past actions. A further playable character who doubles up as the final boss and challenge of this game is Scarlet, the horrifying manifestation of Dr. Martin Fitch's guilt over murdering his own daughter, that of which he dismembered alive as a sacrifice to maintain the pact with the Order and their god. Disturbing bloody stuff, if you ask me. While I will not cover every minute detail of this game, as you very well may want to play it for yourself, we can certainly draw a few conclusions from today's content. As far as OpenBoR titles go, Streets of Rage Silent Hill is certainly an important part of fan project history, as not only did it bring a very creative concept to the table, but it would lay the groundwork for the fantastically balmy Streets of Rage Russia, and give clear inspiration to the refined Streets of Rage zombies along the way too. Fan games are not often analysed from a historical context, which makes sense considering that in the grand scheme of things they are relatively modern things. But through looking at all of these different fan efforts in the past on here, it is certainly becoming more interesting to see how the history of OpenBoR games all fit together, and Streets of Rage Silent Hill forms an important little chapter in the OpenBoR medium. So to close this video rather abruptly compared to normal and keep your attention, I think now will be a good time to let you all know that I'm currently live on Twitch. So if you want, head over to twitch.tv/TopHatGamingMan Live so that we can chat OpenBoR games and other interesting retro gaming topics live with each of you in person. This is obviously only of course if you're one of my passionate viewers who are watching within hours of the time this video was originally uploaded. Still, even if you are watching this at a later date, my goal is to live stream on Twitch every Sunday at 9 PM GMT, so make sure you give me a follow over there now. That way I'll be able to interact with you lot way more than I am currently doing. If you happen to be watching from New York City, that would work out 4 PM your time. Or if you're watching from LA, that'd be 1 PM onwards your time. You all get the gist. Anyway, the plan is to stream for at least a few hours, so I hope to catch some of you right now. Yeah! Speak to you in a second.